The desert wind carried red dust through the windows of the mail coach as it lurched toward San Judas, Arizona territory. Eleanor Ellie Roosevelt gripped her worn leather satchel, watching the landscape transform from endless saguaro forests to the scattered wooden buildings of a frontier town. The year was 1887, and at 28, she was starting over again. Through the dust-caked window, she glimpsed children playing beneath the schoolhouse awning, their laughter cutting through the oppressive August heat. The one-room building stood proud despite its weathered boards and crooked bell tower. This would be her domain, her chance at redemption. "San Judas, miss," the driver called, pulling the horses to a stop before the general store. Ellie descended, her modest gray traveling dress immediately attracting layers of Arizona dust. The town sprawled before her, a main street of packed earth, false-fronted buildings creating patches of blessed shade, and beyond them, the endless expanse of desert meeting mountains. "You must be the new schoolteacher." A woman emerged from the cafe next door, flour dusting her brown hands. "I'm Maria Reyes. Welcome to San Judas." Maria's smile was genuine, her eyes sharp with intelligence. She pressed a pan dulce into Ellie's hands before she could protest. "You'll need strength. Teaching our little wild ones is no easy task." "Thank you." Ellie bit into the sweet bread, savoring the hint of cinnamon. "I'm ready for the challenge." Miss Roosevelt, a tall woman in a deputy's badge, approached, her weathered face cautious but not unkind. "Ada Sherman, deputy sheriff. Just wanted to introduce myself. Make sure you settled in proper." Something in Ada's tone suggested more than courtesy, a warning, perhaps, or an assessment. Ellie had learned to read such nuances during her previous life. "I appreciate that. Deputy, I look forward to being part of this community." Ada's eyes lingered on Ellie's hands, too steady, too scarred for a simple schoolteacher, before nodding. "If you need anything, my office is across from the bank." As the women dispersed, Ellie surveyed her new home. The schoolhouse key weighed heavy in her pocket, a tangible reminder of her purpose here. No more violence, no more investigations that ended in blood. Just children, books, and the chance to build something good. The sound of cattle and shouting drew her attention to the dry wash that cut along the town's eastern edge. Dust clouds rose from what looked like a stampede in miniature, a dozen young horses racing wild along the arroyo. A small figure scrambled up the bank, directly in the animal's path. Ellie's heart lurched one of her future students, a boy no more than 8, frozen in terror as hooves thundered closer. Before she could move, a rider appeared from nowhere, spurring his mount between the child and the herd. In one fluid motion, he leaned down, swept the boy onto his saddle, and guided his horse to safety. The wild horses thundered past, their panic dissipating as they found open desert. The rescuer dismounted, checking the child for injuries with gentle efficiency. "You hurt. Tommy." "No, sir, Mr. Franklin." The boy's voice shook. "I'm sorry, I was just chasing lizards near the wash again." The man's tone was patient, not scolding. "We talked about this. When the rains come, this arroyo turns deadly. You need to respect it." "Yes, sir." "Run on home. Tell your ma I'll stop by later with that flour she ordered." The boy scampered off, leaving his rescuer standing in the settling dust. He turned, and Ellie found herself caught by eyes the color of storm clouds, gray-blue and startling against his sun-weathered face. Benjamin Franklin Calder. She realized the rancher's son Maria had mentioned while showing her around. "Ma'am." He touched his hat brim, a gesture both polite and distant. "That was impressive," Ellie said. "Quick thinking. Just doing what's needed." His hands, she noticed, bore the calluses and scars of hard labor. "You're the new teacher." Not a question. News traveled fast in small towns. "Eleanor Roosevelt. And you're Mr. Calder." "Ben." He shifted. uncomfortable with the formality. "My father owns the Calder Ranch. Welcome to San Judas, Miss Roosevelt." He moved to leave, but she noticed him glance at the schoolhouse with something like longing. "School starts Monday," she offered. "The children would benefit from having community members visit, share their knowledge." "I'm not much for... that is, ranching keeps me busy." The words came out rushed, almost panicked. "Good day, ma'am." He mounted his horse and rode off, leaving Ellie puzzled by his abrupt departure. That evening, she arranged the schoolhouse by lamplight. The space was simple but clean rows of benches, a pot-bellied stove, slate boards, and a modest collection of McGuffey readers stacked on shelves. She ran her fingers over the worn spines, remembering her own education a lifetime ago, before Pinkerton, before the blood. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "It's open," she called. Ben Calder stood in the doorway, hat in hands, looking like he'd rather face another stampede than be here. "Mr. Calder, Ben, is everything all right? I need..." He stopped, started again. "This is difficult to say." Ellie waited, patient. She'd learned the value of silence. "I can't read." The words fell like stones. "Never learned proper. Been faking it my whole life. But with the railroad coming, contracts and deeds." He met her eyes, pride warring with desperation. "Would you teach me private like I can pay?" The vulnerability in his voice, from this man who'd fearlessly faced down wild horses, moved her. "Of course. When can you come?" "After dark, when folks won't." He gestured helplessly. 8 o'clock. We'll start tomorrow." Relief transformed his features. "Thank you. I thank you." The next week passed in a rhythm of days teaching children and evenings with Ben. He was a quick study, hungry for knowledge, frustrated by his limitations. She learned his story in fragments of childhood spent in the saddle, a father who valued cattle over schooling, years of creative avoidance and shameful secrets. "Try again," Ellie encouraged as he struggled with a passage. "Sound it out." "The cat sat..." Ben's jaw clenched. "This is children's work. This is how everyone learns. There's no shame in it." He looked at her then, really looked, and she felt something shift between them. The lamplight softened the harsh planes of his face, revealed the gentleness beneath the rough exterior. "You're not like other teachers," he said quietly. "How many teachers have you known?" she teased, trying to lighten the moment. "Fair point." His rare smile appeared. "But I know you're different. The way you hold yourself, the way you watch everything. You weren't always a teacher." Dangerous territory. "We all have pasts, Ben." He nodded, accepting the boundary. They returned to the lesson, but awareness hummed between them now, as palpable as the desert heat. On the 7th night, breakthrough came. Ben read an entire sentence smoothly, his voice strong and sure. "The ranch spreads wide beneath the Arizona sun." "Yes." Ellie clasped his hands without thinking. "Perfect." They froze, her hands covering his, the space between them charged with possibility. Ben's thumb moved slightly, a whisper of a caress. "Ellie," he said, her nickname rough on his tongue. She should pull away, should maintain professional distance. Instead, she stayed caught in his gaze as he leaned closer. The kiss was swift, gentle, a question more than a statement. She answered by not pulling away, letting him cup her face with those work-hardened hands. When they parted, her cheeks burned. "Ben, we shouldn't..." "I know." But he was smiling, and she found herself smiling back. "I've wanted to do that since you offered to teach me. This complicates things. Everything worthwhile is complicated." A sound outside made them spring apart. Through the window, a figure lurched past Jesse Pike, the sheriff's son, clearly drunk from the saloon. They held their breath until his unsteady footsteps faded. "I should go," Ben said. "Ben," she caught his arm. "What happens here? The lessons. We need to be careful. Your reputation, mine." "I understand." He squeezed her hand. "But Ellie, I'm not sorry." Neither was she, though she knew she should be. The next morning brought unwelcome visitors. Ellie had barely finished arranging the day's lessons when Silas Vane entered, filling the doorway with his expensive suit and practiced smile. Behind him, Sheriff Amos Pike lurked like a well-fed vulture. "Miss Roosevelt, I hope you're settling in well." "Mr. Vane." She'd been warned about the railroad's land agent. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I represent progress, Miss Roosevelt. The Southern Pacific Railroad will transform San Judas from a dusty way station into a thriving hub of commerce." He produced a leather folder. "We're prepared to be generous supporters of education, new books, supplies, perhaps even a larger schoolhouse." "How generous." "All we ask in return is your influence. These people trust teachers. They'll listen when you explain the benefits of selling their land for the railway right-of-way." "The land along Boxwood Wash? You mean where families have been grazing cattle for decades?" His smile tightened. "Progress requires sacrifice. And profit requires cheap land forcibly acquired from desperate people." Sheriff Pike shifted, hand moving to his gun belt, an unstable threat. Vane's mask slipped, revealing the steel beneath. "You're new here. Miss Roosevelt. Perhaps you don't understand how things work. San Judas needs this railroad. Those who stand in the way of progress often find themselves relocated." "Is that a threat, Mr. Vane?" "Merely an observation. Teaching is such uncertain work. Contracts can be terminated. Reputations ruined by the smallest whisper of impropriety." His eyes glinted. "I do hope we understand each other." After they left, Ellie sank onto a bench, hands trembling not with fear, but anger. She'd fled one world of powerful men and their machinations only to find another. But she was no longer the woman who ran these children, this town. Ben, they deserved better. That evening, she told Ben about Vane's visit as they practiced writing. His face darkened. "He's been pressuring Father for months. The ranch controls the best route through the valley. Without it, the railroad would have to go miles around." "What will your father do?" "Fight, for now. But Vane owns the bank, holds half the mortgages in town. He has ways of making people bend." "Not everyone bends," Ellie said quietly. Ben studied her. "No, not everyone." They worked in companionable silence until Ben successfully signed his name for the first time clear. Bold letters. Benjamin F. Calder. "Look at that," Ellie breathed. "You did it." His joy was boyish, transformative. "I never thought, my whole life, making my mark with an X like I was nobody. But this," he traced the letters, "this makes me real." "You were always real, Ben." He stood, energy crackling through him. "Ellie, He stopped, struggled, then pulled her to her feet. "May I?" She nodded, and this kiss was different, deeper, full of promise and passion carefully contained. His hands framed her face like she was something precious, and she let herself melt into him, just for a moment. "The ranch heir kissed the schoolteacher in secret," she murmured against his lips, half teasing. What would the town gossip say? That she blushed, he replied, thumb tracing her heated cheek. Yet couldn't escape him. Didn't want to escape, she corrected. They parted at the sound of footsteps on the porch. Ben moved to the window while Ellie straightened her collar, heart racing. "Someone's coming," he said. "Jesse Pike again. He's been watching the schoolhouse. You should go out the back." "I don't like leaving you." "I can handle myself," more than he knew. "Go, Ben. We'll be careful from now on." He kissed her once more, quickly, then slipped out the back door. Ellie composed herself and opened the front door to find Jesse Pike swaying on the porch. "Evening. Jesse, can I help you?"
"Saw lights,"
he slurred.
"Thought someone was stealing."
"Just preparing tomorrow's lessons. Thank you for your concern." His bloodshot eyes narrowed.
"You alone?"
"As you see. Now, if you'll excuse me."
"Pretty lady like you shouldn't be alone at night. Dangerous."
"Good night, Jesse." She closed the door firmly, threw the bolt, and watched through the curtain until he stumbled away. But she knew he'd seen Ben, or at least suspected. By tomorrow, whispers would start. Ellie pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling Ben's kiss, still seeing the joy in his eyes when he wrote his name. Whatever came next, Vane's threats, the town's judgment, the secrets in her past, she wouldn't run. Not this time. She had found something worth fighting for. The morning sun painted San Judas in shades of gold and rust as Eleanor Roosevelt stood before her classroom, 23 eager faces watching her every move. She'd been teaching for 2 weeks now, and already she could see changes. Tommy Edison no longer threw rocks at the girls. Young Clara Barton had discovered a love for numbers, and even the Rowdy Johnson brothers sat still during reading time. "Today, we're going to learn about land surveying," Ellie announced, producing a measuring rope and wooden stakes. "Who can tell me why knowing your property boundaries matters?" Several hands shot up. She called on Samuel Morse, a quiet boy from one of the farming families. "So nobody can steal your land." "Exactly right, Samuel. And how do we prove what belongs to whom?" "Papers," Clara offered. "Deeds and such." "Yes, but what if you can't read those papers?" The children fell silent, understanding dawning. Many of their parents couldn't read beyond simple words, if at all. "That's why we're going outside today," Ellie continued. "We're going to practice measuring and mapping, so you can help your families understand their property lines." The enthusiasm was infectious as they trooped outside. Ellie had chosen the schoolyard, deliberately neutral ground where Silas Vane couldn't complain she was interfering with railroad business. As the children practiced with ropes and stakes, she noticed Maria Reyes approaching, her usual flour-dusted apron replaced by a clean blue dress. "Field lessons?" Maria asked, watching the children work. "Practical. Their parents will appreciate that." "Knowledge should be useful," Ellie replied. "Not just decorative." Maria lowered her voice. "Speaking of useful knowledge, I overheard something at the cafe yesterday. Thomas Paine from the bank was in his cups, complaining about the extra work Vane has him doing. Something about adjusting loan documents." Ellie's attention sharpened, though she kept her expression mild. "Adjusting. Adding fees, changing dates, making it so folks who've been paying steady suddenly owe much more." Maria's dark eyes flashed with anger. "My cousin Jorge. He's been paying his loan faithful for 3 years. Yesterday they told him he's behind 6 months and they'll take his farm. Has he talked to Sheriff Pike?" Maria's laugh was bitter. "You haven't been here long enough to understand. Pike's as bought as a man can be. His salary comes from town taxes, but his extra's all Vane money." Before Ellie could respond, a commotion erupted near the wash. Several children were pointing and shouting. She hurried over to find Ben Calder watering his horse at the creek's thin trickle, trying to ignore the excited children. "It's Mr. Franklin," Tommy Edison called out. "He saved me from the horses." Ben looked up, caught Ellie's eye, and she saw a flash of the man who'd kissed her in lamplight. But here, in daylight with children watching, he merely touched his hat. "Miss Roosevelt, sorry to interrupt your lesson." "Not at all. Children, would you like Mr. Calder to show you how to read animal tracks? It's another kind of surveying." The suggestion was spontaneous, but Ben caught on quickly. "I suppose I could spare a few minutes?" For the next half hour, he taught them to identify horse, cattle, coyote, and rabbit tracks in the sandy soil. Ellie watched him work, patient with questions, drawing clear examples with a stick. When young William Cody asked why reading tracks mattered, Ben's answer surprised her. Because the land talks to us through marks and signs. If you can't read what it's saying, you might miss something important like water in a drought or danger coming your way. His eyes met hers on those last words, and she knew he wasn't just talking about animal tracks. That evening, their lesson took a different turn. Ben had progressed from simple sentences to attempting his father's contracts. Ellie watched him struggle with the legal language, his finger tracing each word. "This part here," he said, frustration evident. "About forfeit upon failure to maintain continuous occupation. What does that mean?" Ellie leaned closer, their shoulders touching. "It means if you leave the land for any reason, even something beyond your control like illness or weather, you lose your claim." "That's not right. What if there's a drought and you have to move the cattle to water?" "Then according to this, you'd forfeit." She studied the document more carefully. "Ben, this isn't a standard contract. These terms are predatory." "It's what Vane offered Father last month. Pa turned him down, but others signed similar papers." His jaw clenched. "If I'd been able to read proper before..." "You're reading now. That's what matters." She covered his hand with hers. "We can review all your father's documents. Make sure there aren't any surprises." "Ellie," his voice dropped low. "Why are you really here? A woman like you. Educated, refined, you could teach anywhere. Why San Judas?" She'd known this question would come eventually. Everyone deserves a second chance. Ben, even teachers. "Running from something." "Running to something," she corrected. "A place where I could make a difference without..." She stopped, aware she'd said too much. Without violence," she finished quietly. Ben turned his hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. "We've all got past wounds. Ellie, doesn't mean we can't build something new." The tenderness in his voice nearly undid her. She wanted to tell him everything about Pinkerton, about the blood on her hands, about the nightmares that still woke her. Instead, she squeezed his hand and returned to the contract. "Let's focus on Clause 7. It's particularly troublesome. They worked until the lamp burned low. Careful touches and lingering looks saying what words couldn't." When Ben finally prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Ellie, I want to court you proper, public-like." "Ben, no. Your reputation, your father's standing..." "I don't care about..." "But I do." She touched his face gently. "What we have here, these moments, they're ours. If we make it public now, with Vane looking for leverage, we'd both become targets." "You're already a target. You refused his offer." "Then let's not give him more ammunition." Ben caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "For now, but I won't hide forever. Ellie, what I feel for you, it's not some shameful secret." After he left, Ellie stood in the empty schoolhouse, heart full of conflicting emotions. She'd come here to escape entanglements, yet here she was, falling for a man whose gentle strength called to everything soft she'd thought she'd buried. The next few days brought troubling developments. 3 more families reported errors in their loan documents. Maria's cousin Jorge received an eviction notice despite having payment receipts. And Jesse Pike had taken to loitering near the schoolhouse, making crude comments when Ellie passed. It was Deputy Ada Sherman who finally approached her with a warning. "You're stirring up hornets, Miss Roosevelt." Ada had cornered her outside the general store, voice low but urgent. "Teaching those children to survey land, helping folks read their contracts, Vane doesn't like it." "I'm teaching practical skills. Deputy, nothing illegal about that." "Legal's got nothing to do with it." Ada glanced around nervously. "I became a deputy to uphold justice, but there's precious little of that when the sheriff's in Vane's pocket." "Then why stay?" "Because someone needs to stand between the wolves and the sheep, even if all I can do is watch and warn." Ada's weathered face showed years of compromise and frustration. "Be careful. Miss Roosevelt. And tell the Calders to double-check their fence lines. Heard rumors Vane's been sending surveyors out at night, moving markers. That evening, Ellie shared Ada's warning with Ben. His face darkened as she spoke, and when she finished, he slammed his fist on the desk. Damn the man, pardon my language, but I've heard worse, much worse, in her previous life. What matters is protecting your family's land. Can you verify your original boundary markers? Some are rocks my grandfather placed, but papers, bills of sale. Ben gestured helplessly. Father keeps them, but I've never been able to check them myself. Bring them tomorrow. All of them. We'll go through everything. Ellie, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. She moved closer, drawn by his distress. We're in this together now. Are we? His hands settled on her waist, careful and questioning. Because sometimes I feel like you're still half ready to run. I'm here, she said simply. That's all I can promise right now. He accepted that, kissing her with a sweetness that made her chest ache. They kept their embraces controlled, respectful, both aware that crossing certain lines would change everything. But the restraint only made each touch more precious. Each kiss a small rebellion against the forces trying to control them. 2 nights later, their secret classroom expanded. Maria arrived with Jorge and 2 other farmers, all carrying loan documents they couldn't fully read. Word had spread quietly through the Mexican families, the ones Vane considered easy marks. We're not looking for charity, Jorge explained in accented English. Just understanding what we signed, what we owe true. Ben helped Ellie arrange extra lamps while she organized the papers. What they found made her blood boil. Hidden fees, compound interest calculated wrong, dates mysteriously changed, all designed to push families into default. This is systematic theft, she said quietly. Legal looking enough to pass casual inspection, but fraudulent at its core. Can we fight it? Maria asked. Not in Pike's court, Ben said grimly. He'd rule in Vane's favor before you finished talking. Then we document everything, Ellie decided. Make copies, gather evidence. If we can't get justice locally, we'll go to the territorial authorities. It was past midnight when their impromptu class ended. Ben stayed to help Ellie clean up, both exhausted but oddly exhilarated. You were something tonight, he said, watching her stack papers. Like a general planning battle. She stiffened, but his tone held only admiration, not suspicion. Just a teacher trying to help, she deflected. No. He caught her hand. You're more than that. Whatever you were before, whoever you were, I see you. Ellie. The real you. And she's magnificent. Tears threatened. When was the last time someone had seen her? Not her role or her failures. Ben... Shh. He pulled her close. Not for passion, but comfort. You don't have to tell me. Just know that whatever comes, you're not facing it alone anymore. She let herself be held, feeling safer than she had in years. Outside, a coyote howled at the desert moon, and the wind whispered promises of rain that might never come. But inside the little schoolhouse, 2 people were building something that might withstand any storm if they were brave enough to fight for it. The next morning brought consequences. Vane himself appeared at the school, flanked by Sheriff Pike and 2 hired guns. The children huddled nervously as the men entered. Class is in session. Gentlemen, Ellie said calmly, state your business. Word is you've been holding illegal gatherings. Pike drawled. Secret meetings after dark. That's conspiracy. Miss Roosevelt. I've been teaching adults to read. Since when is education illegal? When it's used to undermine legitimate business, Vane interjected smoothly. Several citizens have been spreading lies about banking practices, creating unrest, all traced back to your lessons. If accurate reading creates unrest, perhaps the problem lies in what's being read, not who's doing the reading. Vane's composure cracked.
You forget yourself, woman. This isn't some eastern city where radicals run free. This is my town.
No. Ellie stood, every inch the authority she'd once been. This is their town, these children's town, and I'll teach them what they need to survive in it. The moment stretched taut. One of the hired guns shifted, hand moving toward his weapon. Several children whimpered. Then Ben's voice came from the doorway.
Problem here, gentlemen.
He stood backlit by morning sun, not openly armed but radiating quiet threat. Behind him, she glimpsed other figures, Jorge, Maria's husband, several Calder ranch hands. No problem, Vane said after a pause. Just clarifying expectations. Good day, Miss Roosevelt, Mr. Calder. They filed out, Pike shooting one last venomous look. Ben stayed until they were gone, then knelt beside Tommy Edison, who was crying. Hey now, partner, they're gone. Miss Roosevelt won't let anything happen to you. Promise, the boy sniffled. Ellie met Ben's eyes over Tommy's head. I promise, she said, and meant it. Whatever came next. She'd protect these children, this town, this chance at redemption. And maybe, just maybe, she'd found something worth staying for. The smell of rain haunted the desert air like a ghost. Eleanor Roosevelt stood outside the schoolhouse, watching dark clouds mass over the distant mountains. 3 weeks had passed since Vane's threat, and the tension in San Judas grew thick as the humidity that promised storms. Miss Roosevelt. Clara Barton came running, braids flying. Papa says the mountain rains are coming. He's moving our sheep to higher ground. Similar preparations were underway throughout the town. Old-timers read the signs the way ants moved in urgent lines, how the birds fell silent, the pressure that made joints ache. Mountain rains meant flash floods, and Boxwood Wash could transform from dusty arroyo to raging torrent in minutes. Tell your father to be careful, Clara, and make sure your family has emergency supplies ready. Ben appeared around the corner, his horse lathered with sweat. Ellie, we need to move the children home. Now! The urgency in his voice made her heart race. What's happening? Cloudburst in the mountains. Big one. Water's already rushing down the smaller canyons. He dismounted, already helping her gather the children. This wash is going to flood within the hour. They worked together with practiced efficiency, loading smaller children onto Ben's horse and organizing the older ones. Parents arrived, equally urgent, snatching up their young ones with hurried thanks. Tommy, Ellie called, realizing the Edison boy was missing. Has anyone seen Tommy? He went to get his lucky marble. William Cody pointed toward the wash. Said he dropped it by the old cottonwood. Ben cursed. The cottonwood stood on a small island in the middle of the usually dry wash death ground when floods came. Get the rest to safety, he told Ellie, already running. I'll find him. Ben, no let me, but he was gone, vaulting onto his horse and spurring toward the wash. Ellie ensured the last children were with adults, then ran after him. Her Pinkerton training kicked in swift assessment, calculated risks. The wash stretched 50 yards wide here, its sandy bottom deceptively peaceful, but she could hear it now, a rumble like distant thunder growing closer. She spotted them immediately. Tommy stood frozen on the island, Ben's horse struggling through the deepening sand to reach him. The boy clutched something in his fist, his precious marble. Leave it, Ben shouted, but Tommy seemed paralyzed. The rumble became a roar. Ellie's blood froze as she saw it, a wall of brown water, debris, and foam racing down the wash, trees tumbling like matchsticks in its fury. Ben reached Tommy just as the flood hit. His horse screamed, going down in the initial impact. Ellie watched in horror as man, boy, and animal were swept into the churning chaos. No! The word tore from her throat. Without thinking, she ran along the bank, eyes searching desperately. There Ben had Tommy, was swimming hard for the eastern bank where a rock outcrop created an eddy. But the current was winning, pulling them past potential safety. A rope. She needed rope. The school's well had one. Ellie sprinted back, her skirts hampering movement. She hiked them up without regard for propriety, grabbed the well rope, and ran downstream to where the wash narrowed. Ben was fighting to keep Tommy's head above water, his own strength failing. They'd have one chance as the current swept them past. Ben, rope. She threw with all her might. The rope fell short. The flood was carrying them away. Then strong hands joined hers. Maria Reyes, Jorge, others from the town. Together they hauled the rope back, threw again. This time Ben caught it. The sudden weight nearly yanked Ellie into the water, but the human chain held, inch by agonizing inch. They pulled against the current's fury. Pull, pull, someone shouted. Was it her? Ben's feet found purchase on a submerged rock. He lifted Tommy higher, the boy coughing water but alive. Hands reached down, grabbed the child, passed him to safety. Ben tried to follow but slipped, the current catching him again. Hold on. Ellie wrapped the rope around her waist, ready to go in after him. No, Ada Sherman appeared, grabbing her. You'll both drown. But Ben found strength somewhere, hauling himself up hand over hand until Jorge and another man could grab his arms. They dragged him onto the bank where he collapsed, chest heaving. Ellie dropped beside him, hands checking for injuries with clinical efficiency even as her heart hammered with relief. You impossible fool, she whispered. Had to, he gasped. Couldn't let, he coughed, spat muddy water. The boy. Tommy Edison huddled nearby, clutching his marble and sobbing. His mother arrived, gathering him with tears and scoldings. The marble fell unnoticed in the mud. We need to get him warm, Ellie said, helping Ben sit up. Both of them. The immediate crisis passed. She became aware of their audience. Half the town had witnessed the rescue and her undignified rope throwing, skirts hiked to her knees. But no one seemed to care about propriety in the face of near tragedy. They helped Ben to Maria's cafe. Someone produced blankets and hot coffee. Ellie fussed over him until he caught her hand. I'm all right, he said quietly. Thanks to you. Thanks to everyone. But she didn't pull her hand away, not caring who saw. The flood raged for 3 hours, transforming the landscape. When the waters finally receded, they left devastation and discoveries. The scouring current had exposed bedrock in places, including old survey markers that had been buried for decades. It was Ruth Tallwoman, the Navajo healer everyone called Senora Ruth, who recognized their significance first. She'd come to help treat the flood victims, but stopped short at the wash's edge, studying the exposed stones. These marks, she said in her careful English, very old. From before the Spanish grants, when this was Apache and Indian land. Ben, recovered enough to investigate despite Ellie's protests, knelt beside her. What do they mean? Boundaries, water rights. Ruth's weathered face was grave. My grandmother spoke of agreements, where water was shared, land respected, before papers and laws changed everything. Over the following days, as the town dried out and tallied damages, more discoveries emerged. The flood had shifted the wash's course in places, revealing not just old markers but new contradictions. The official survey maps at the bank, the ones Vane used to pressure landowners, showed boundaries that no longer matched physical reality if they ever had. Look at this, Ellie said, comparing maps in the schoolhouse with Ada Sherman. They'd established an uneasy alliance, the deputy grateful for an educated ally. According to Vane's surveys, the Calder's south pasture sits on the wash's west side, but these old markers in the new flood line show it clearly on the east. Meaning the railroad right-of-way Vane claims to need would actually cross land that doesn't exist where he says it does. Ada whistled low. That's fraud, clear as day. Only if we can prove the original surveys, Spanish land grants, territorial claims, it's a legal maze. Ben arrived then, bringing coffee and news. Father's agreed to let you examine all our documents. The flood spooked him. He realizes we could lose everything if we can't prove our boundaries. That evening, Ellie spread decades of papers across the schoolhouse floor. Ben helped, reading slowly but accurately now, making notes. The lamplight painted golden circles as they worked, creating an intimate world within the larger chaos. "This grant," Ellie said suddenly. "It references the wash as Rio Caja de Madera Boxwood River, but it describes it flowing north of where it runs now." "Rivers change course," Ben said, "especially in flood." "Yes, but if the original grant used the river as a boundary marker, and the river has moved—" She trailed off, mind racing. "Ben, this could invalidate half the current property claims, including Vane's." He looked up sharply. "You mean—" "I mean, the land he's trying to force you to sell might not be yours to sell or his to claim. It might still be territorial land, or even tribal land if we go back far enough." They stared at each other, understanding dawning. This was bigger than loan fraud or railroad schemes. This touched the very foundation of ownership in San Judas. A knock interrupted. Maria entered with several others: Jorge, Deputy Ada, even Ruth Tallwoman. "We heard you were investigating the boundaries," Maria said. "We brought our papers too. If there's a chance to fight Vane legally." Soon the schoolhouse overflowed with people and documents. Ellie organized them into groups, teaching basic surveying principles, helping them understand their own deeds. Ben worked alongside her, no longer hiding his newfound literacy, reading aloud for those who couldn't. "We'll need to document everything." Ellie addressed the room. "Every marker, every discrepancy. Take photographs if possible, make sketches. We're building a case." "For what?" Jorge asked. "Pike won't hear us fairly." "Then we go above Pike, to the territorial government, maybe even federal level." She met their eyes steadily. "This won't be easy. Vane has money, connections. He'll fight dirty." "He's been fighting dirty all along," someone called out. "At least now we're fighting back." As the meeting dispersed, Ben lingered. They were alone again, surrounded by the debris of their investigation. "You were magnificent tonight," he said softly, leading them, teaching them to defend themselves. "Like you were born to it." Ellie's chest tightened. If only he knew how she'd actually used those skills before. "Just doing what's needed." "No." He moved closer, cupping her face gently. "You're doing what's right. There's a difference." She leaned into his touch, allowing herself this moment of weakness. "Ben, when this is over, don't." He kissed her forehead, soft as butterfly wings. "Don't talk about endings. Not yet." They stood there, holding each other in the lamplight, while outside the desert night sang with coyotes and wind. The flood had washed away more than earth and stones. It had exposed truths that would reshape their world. But first, they had to survive what came next. The retaliation began 2 days later. The schoolhouse windows were broken in the night. Anonymous threats nailed to the door. Parents received warnings about sending their children to a radical teacher. Jorge's loan was called in full with 24 hours' notice. "They're scared," Ada told Ellie privately. "Vane's pushing Pike to arrest you for inciting rebellion. Only reason he hasn't is he knows it would spark real violence." "Let him try," Ellie said grimly. "I've faced worse than small-town tyrants." But when Ben didn't appear for his evening lesson, worry gnawed at her. He'd never missed without word. As darkness fell, she made a decision that would have horrified her proper teacher persona. She saddled the horse Ben had taught her to ride and headed for Calder Ranch. The ride through darkness reminded her of other nights, other missions. But this time she rode toward something instead of away. The ranch buildings appeared, lit by lanterns, voices raised in argument. "Won't stand for it." That was old Abraham Calder, Ben's father. "Bad enough you're learning letters like some clerk. Now you're dragging our name through mud with that rabble-rousing teacher." "Her name is Eleanor," Ben's voice, steady but strained.
And she's trying to save this ranch. If you just listen, I don't need some Eastern woman telling me my business Vane came by today, made a generous offer. We'd be fools not to take it. Father, no. Look at the documents first. Ellie found... The crack of a slap echoed across the yard. Ellie's hands tightened on the reins. You'll not speak that woman's name in my house, Abraham snarled. Choose, boy, her or your inheritance. You can't have both. Silence stretched. Then Ben's voice, quiet but firm. Then I choose her. Ellie's heart stopped, then raced. She shouldn't be hearing this, should leave before. Who's there? A ranch hand had spotted her. Too late to run. She rode forward into the light, meeting Abraham Calder's furious gaze steadily. Mr. Calder, I came to check on Ben when he didn't appear for our meeting about the boundary documents. You... The old man's face flushed darker. You've bewitched my son, filled his head with foolishness. Father, Ben started forward, but Abraham cut him off with a gesture. No, I'll say my piece. He stalked toward Ellie's horse. I know your type. Miss Reformers, idealists. You blow into towns, stir up trouble, then leave when things get hard. Well, you won't destroy what I've built. I'm trying to save what you've built, Ellie said quietly. If you'd examine the evidence. Evidence? You mean the ravings of Mexicans and Indians, the complaints of fools who couldn't read their own contracts. He spat in the dust. Vane offers progress. You offer chaos. I offer truth. Truth. His laugh was ugly. What would a schoolteacher know of truth in a hard world? More than you could imagine, she thought, but didn't say. Instead, I know that your son is one of the finest men I've met. I know he loves this land and would die defending it. And I know you're making a mistake that will cost everything. Ben reached her stirrup, hand on her knee. Ellie, you shouldn't have come. Neither should you, she told him gently. But here we are. Abraham's voice cracked like a whip. Get off my land, woman, and stay away from my son, or I'll have Pike arrest you for trespassing and more besides. Ellie looked down at Ben, saw the anguish in his eyes. I should go. I'm coming with you. Ben, no. I made my choice. He swung up behind her on the horse, arms coming around her to take the reins. Father, when you're ready to listen to reason instead of fear, you know where to find me. They rode away in silence, Abraham's curses following them into the night. Ellie could feel the tension in Ben's body, the cost of his decision. You shouldn't have done that, she said finally. You shouldn't have come alone. His breath stirred her hair. We're both fools, it seems. Where will you go? Maria keeps rooms above the cafe. I'll manage. His arms tightened briefly. I'm sorry you witnessed that. I'm sorry you had to choose. No. He turned the horse toward town, toward their uncertain future. The only thing I'm sorry about is that it took me so long to make the right choice. As they rode through the darkness, the weight of coming battle pressed down on them. Vane would escalate now. The town would be forced to take sides. And somewhere in the shadows, larger forces were moving railroad money, territorial politics, the endless hunger for land and power. But for this moment, they had each other. And sometimes, Ellie thought as she leaned back into Ben's solid warmth, that was enough to start a revolution. The morning after Ben's break with his father, Eleanor Roosevelt woke to find a letter slipped under her door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message chilled her blood. We know who you really are, Miss Hart. Her birth name, the one she'd buried along with her Pinkerton badge. Ellie sank onto her bed, letter trembling in her hands. How she'd been so careful, creating Eleanor Roosevelt from scattered pieces of truth and necessity. But someone had dug deeper, found the thread that connected her to Elizabeth Hart, the Pinkerton agent who disappeared after the Clearwater mine disaster. A knock startled her. Ellie, it's Ben!
She opened the door to find him holding 2 cups of Maria's coffee, looking tired but determined. His expression shifted when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. His jaw tightened as he read.
"Who's Miss Hart?"
The moment of truth. Ellie closed the door, leaned against it. "Me, before I became Eleanor Roosevelt." Ben set down the coffee carefully. "I think you'd better explain." So she did. The words came haltingly at first. Then, in a rush, her recruitment by Pinkerton at 22. Hungry and desperate. The years of investigation, infiltration, gathering evidence against corrupt industrialists, the Clearwater mine operation that went wrong when her partner sold information to the mine owners, the explosion that killed 13 miners because they'd been warned too late about unsafe conditions.
"I identified the bodies," she whispered. "Men I'd drunk with, whose families I knew, dead because I'd failed to stop it in time."
Ben hadn't moved throughout her confession. "It wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it? I was trained to prevent such things. Instead, I was part of the system that enabled them." She met his eyes, bracing for judgment.
"So I quit, took what money I had, created a new identity, and ran. Became a teacher because I thought if I could educate people, help them read contracts and know their rights, maybe I could balance the scales. And now someone knows." "Yes," she laughed bitterly. "Vane, probably. It's the kind of information he'd pay well for."
Ben moved then, crossing to her in 2 strides and pulling her into his arms. "Listen to me. I don't care what name you were born with or what you did before. I know who you are now. You're the woman who risks everything to teach children and adults alike, who stands up to powerful men, who saved my life in that flood." "Ben, no, my turn to talk." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "You think I'm disappointed, Ellie? You just told me you were a professional investigator. Do you know what this means for our fight against Vane?" She blinked, confused by his reaction. "What?" "It means we have someone who actually knows how to build a legal case, who understands evidence and documentation." His smile was fierce. "Vane thinks he's exposed a weakness. Instead, he's revealed our greatest strength." Before she could respond, another knock came. "Miss Roosevelt, Mr. Calder," Maria's voice, urgent. "You need to see this." They followed her to the cafe where a crowd had gathered. Jorge stood in the center, holding a paper with shaking hands. "Foreclosure notice," he said numbly. "Not just me. 7 families, all this morning, due immediately." "But we've been paying," his wife protested. "Every month, never missed." Ada Sherman pushed through the crowd, her face grim. "Pike's posted notices at the courthouse. Emergency auction scheduled for day after tomorrow. Vane's bank is calling in all loans with irregularities."
"What irregularities?"
Ellie demanded. "According to these papers, missed payments that were never missed, fees that were never disclosed, technicalities that didn't exist until today." Ada's voice was bitter. "Legal theft, plain and simple."
"Can we fight it?" someone asked. "Not in 2 days, not through proper channels."
Ada looked at Ellie meaningfully.
"Unless someone knows improper channels."
The crowd turned to Ellie. She felt the weight of their hope, their desperation. Ben's hand found hers, steady and sure. "All right," she said, "but I'll need help. And you all need to understand if we do this, we're declaring war on Vane. There's no going back." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. These people had been pushed too far. "What do you need?" Maria asked. "First, every document any of you have. Loans, deeds, receipts, everything. Bring them here tonight." Ellie's mind raced. Planning. "Second, I need someone who can get into the bank after hours." "I can," a quiet voice said. Thomas Payne stepped forward, the bank clerk Maria had mentioned weeks ago. I've been keeping copies of things. Couldn't stand what they were making me do." "Brave man," Ben murmured.
Desperate man, Thomas corrected. They foreclosed on my sister last month. She has 3 children. Then we'll get her farm back too, Ellie promised. Tonight, after the bank closes, you'll go in as usual to finish paperwork. But you'll have help. She outlined the plan quickly. Thomas would unlock the back door. Ellie and Ada would photograph documents Ada had confiscated a camera in a previous case. Ben and Jorge would stand watch. Maria would coordinate alibis for everyone involved. This is conspiracy, Ada pointed out. If we're caught, then we'd better not get caught, Ellie said simply. Unless anyone has a legal alternative. Silence answered her. That evening, as they prepared, Ben found Ellie alone in the schoolhouse. She was loading the camera, checking the flash powder. You've done this before, he observed. Different context, same skills. She looked up. Are you sure you want to be part of this? Your father? Made his choice. I've made mine. He moved closer. Ellie, that letter this morning. Are you worried? That vein will expose me yet. The Pinkerton name is mud in these parts. Labor organizers. Common folk, they'd never trust me again. Then we'd better make sure he doesn't get the chance. She smiled despite her worry. When did you become so devious? When I started learning from you? He kissed her then, soft and sure. For luck, he said when they parted. We'll need more than luck tonight. They met at Maria's after dark. Thomas was pale but determined. Ada wore men's clothing for easier movement, and Jorge had recruited 2 more men for lookout duty. Ruth, tall woman, appeared with a bundle of herbs. For clarity of mind and sharp eyes, she said, pressing small pouches into their hands. And to confuse any dogs that might bark, the walk to the bank felt eternal. Every shadow could hide Pike's men. Every sound might herald discovery. But the streets remained empty, the town asleep or deliberately looking away. Thomas's hands shook as he unlocked the door. Vane's office is upstairs. The real records are in his private safe. Can you open it? Ellie asked. I've watched him. I think so. They split up Ada photographing the main files while Ellie and Thomas headed upstairs. Ben positioned himself at the window, watching the street. Vane's office reeked of cigar smoke and greed. Thomas went straight to a painting of a locomotive, swinging it aside to reveal a safe. How long? Ellie whispered. 5 minutes, maybe 10. She left him to work. Examining Vane's desk, most papers were routine, but a locked drawer drew her attention. The pics from her Pinkerton days still served the lock yielded in seconds. Inside lay dynamite. Not literal, though Vane probably had that too, but documentary. Letters from railroad executives discussing land acquisition at any cost. Maps showing planned routes that would make certain investors rich. And at the bottom, correspondence with territorial judges about ensuring favorable rulings. Got it, Thomas breathed, safe swinging open. The safe's contents were even more damning. 2 sets of books for the bank, one official, 1 reel forged documents, and a leather journal in Vane's hand detailing every bribe, threat, and manipulation. Photograph everything, Ellie ordered, already setting up shots. Quickly! The flash powder popped and sizzled, filling the room with acrid smoke. Page after page, they documented Vane's crimes, but as she worked, Ellie found something that made her blood run cold. A file labeled Heart E. Inside, her Pinkerton record. Newspaper clippings from the Clearwater disaster, and a telegram confirmed Roosevelt is Hart. Proceed as discussed. Ellie, Ben's urgent hiss from below. Someone's coming. She grabbed the file and the most damning ledgers. No time for more photos. Go, she told Thomas. Back door, now. They flew down the stairs as the front door rattled. Ada was already gone, following the plan. But as they reached the back exit, Jesse Pike stepped from the shadows, gun drawn. Well, thieves in the night. Ellie stepped forward. shielding Thomas. Let him go. Jesse, your issue is with me. My issue is with all you law-breaking. Ben's fist connected with Jesse's jaw, dropping him like a stone. Never did like him, Ben said conversationally. Quick, before he wakes. They ran into the night, documents clutched tight, behind them. Jesse's groans turned to shouts. Soon the whole town would know. They reconvened at Maria's, breathless and triumphant. The photographs were clear, the stolen documents devastating, but Ellie knew their victory was temporary. Vane will retaliate, she warned. Hard and fast. We need to get this evidence to someone who can act on it before... The cafe door burst open. Sheriff Pike stood there, badge glinting, face twisted with rage. Eleanor Roosevelt, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, theft, and conspiracy. On whose evidence? Ada stepped forward, still in her authority as deputy. I'll need to see warrants, witness statements. You'll need to see a jail cell next to hers. Pike snarled. You think I don't know you were part of this? Actually, a new voice said from behind Pike. I think you'll find Miss Sherman was with me all evening. Abraham Calder stepped into view, looking older but resolute. Playing chess at the ranch. I'm prepared to swear to it. Shocked silence. Ben stared at his father. Pa. Boy's got more spine than I credited, Abraham said gruffly. Came to the ranch tonight, showed me some interesting documents about our land, made me think maybe I've been a fool. He looked at Pike. So, unless you're calling me a liar, Sheriff, I'd say you've got no case against the deputy. Pike's hand went to his gun, but froze as several armed ranch hands appeared behind Abraham. Careful, Pike, the old man warned. This is still my town, too. The sheriff's face purpled, but he backed down. This isn't over, not by a long shot. He pointed at Ellie. Especially for you, Miss Hart. The name dropped like a bomb. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ellie felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Oh, yes. Pike sneered. Vane knows all about you. Pinkerton agent, spy. How many of your investigations ended with working men in chains or graves? That's not, Ben started, but Ellie touched his arm. No, she said quietly. He's right. I was a Pinkerton. I did work that I came to regret. That's why I left, why I came here. She looked at the assembled townspeople, seeing suspicion bloom in some faces. But everything I've done in San Judas has been to help you. That's the truth. Truth from a professional liar. Pike laughed. They'll never trust you now. Maybe not, Maria said, stepping forward. But I'd rather have an honest sinner helping us than a corrupt saint destroying us. She looked around the room. Miss Roosevelt Hart, whoever she is, she's taught our children, helped us read our contracts, risked arrest tonight for us. What have you done, Sheriff? Accept Pike Vane's bidding. Others murmured agreement, though Ellie saw some slip away. Unwilling to associate with her now, the damage was done. You have one day, Pike said finally. Turn over whatever you stole. Leave town, and maybe Vane won't press charges. Otherwise, he drew a finger across his throat. After he left, the room erupted in arguments. Some wanted to flee, others to fight. Abraham Calder's presence commanded attention, but even he couldn't unite the fractured group. Enough, Ruth Tallwoman's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone turned to the elderly healer. You squabble while the enemy grows stronger. Miss Hart's past matters less than our future. The question is simple. Do we submit or resist? With what? Someone asked. Pike's the law. Vane has the money. We have evidence, Ellie said, holding up the documents. Enough to interest federal authorities, the railroad commissioners, territorial governors who aren't in Vane's pocket. But how do we get it to them? Thomas asked. Vane controls the telegraph, the mail. I'll take it. Ben's voice was firm. Ride to Tucson. Put it directly in the right hands. That's 3 days through desert, his father protested. Vane will have men watching every road. Then I'll go another way. Ben looked at Ellie. Unless you have a better plan. Detective. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Actually, I do. But we'll need to split up. Multiple riders, different routes, duplicate evidence. Make it impossible for Vane to stop us all. I'll ride south, Jorge volunteered. I know paths through the mountains. North for me, Ada said. I've got contacts in Prescott. Others stepped forward. Even some who'd been suspicious moments before offered help. Ellie felt a surge of hope. Then we move at dawn, she decided. Tonight we prepare. Copy everything by hand if needed. Pack supplies. She looked at each volunteer. Understand this is dangerous. Vane won't hesitate to... We know, Maria interrupted. We've always known what kind of man he is. The difference is, now we're not facing him alone. As the group dispersed to prepare, Ben lingered. His father approached awkwardly. Son, what you showed me tonight, our land, the truth about the boundaries. Ellie found it, Ben said. She's the one who... I know. Abraham looked at Ellie, really seeing her for the first time. I judged hastily. Miss, whatever name you wear, whatever you were before, you're fighting for justice now. That matters. Thank you, Ellie said softly. Your support means everything. Support? Nothing. I'm riding east myself. Got friends in the cavalry who should hear about this. He clasped Ben's shoulder. Take care of each other. After he left, Ben and Ellie stood alone in the empty cafe. Dawn was coming, bringing either salvation or destruction. No matter what happens, Ben said, I want you to know. Don't! She pressed fingers to his lips. No goodbyes. We're going to win this. And after, we'll see who Eleanor Roosevelt really is, who Elizabeth Hart became. Maybe she's someone worth knowing. I already know her, Ben said simply. And she's worth everything. They held each other as the first light touched the eastern mountains, painting the desert in shades of hope and blood. In a few hours, riders would scatter across Arizona territory, carrying proof of corruption and crime. Vane would react violently, that was certain. Some of them might not survive. But for now, in the quiet before the storm, two people who'd found each other against all odds stood together, ready to fight for justice, for their town, for a future where truth mattered more than power. The real battle for San Judas was about to begin. The dawn departure never came. By first light, San Judas had transformed into an armed camp. Sheriff Pike's men blockaded every road out of town, and Vane himself stood on the bank steps like a general surveying his battlefield. Eleanor Roosevelt watched from the schoolhouse window as their carefully laid plans crumbled. The riders who'd volunteered to carry evidence were turned back at gunpoint. Jorge barely escaped arrest, returning to Maria's cafe with news that made her heart sink. They knew, he gasped, accepting water from his wife. Every route we planned, they were waiting. Someone talked, Ada Sherman said grimly, checking her rifle. Or they figured out our intentions. Ben paced the schoolhouse floor, frustration radiating from every movement. We're trapped. Can't get word out. Can't leave town. And the auction's tomorrow, Thomas Paine added miserably. 7 families will lose everything. Ellie studied the documents spread before her evidence that could destroy Vane. Useless if they couldn't get it to outside authorities. Her Pinkerton training screamed at her to find another way, but every option seemed blocked. Miss Roosevelt, Clara Barton peered around the door. Should we still have school today? The question pierced through Ellie's despair. These children, looking to her for normalcy amidst chaos. Yes, Clara, tell everyone school continues as usual. Are you sure? Ben asked after Clara left. With everything happening? Especially with everything happening. She began arranging desks. If we stop teaching, stop living, Vane wins without firing a shot.
Parents brought their children despite the tension, perhaps because of it. The familiar routine of lessons offered an anchor in the storm, but concentration proved difficult with armed men patrolling outside and worry etched on every young face. During arithmetic, a commotion arose outside. Through the window, Ellie saw Maria Reyes arguing with Sheriff Pike while several men ransacked her cafe.
"Stay here,"
Ellie told the class, but Tommy Edison was already at the window.
"They're wrecking everything," he cried, "breaking dishes and—"
The other children rushed to look, voices rising in distress. Many had parents who gathered at Maria's, found comfort in her hospitality. Seeing it destroyed struck at their sense of safety.
"Children, sit down,"
Ellie commanded, but her authority faltered as the destruction intensified. Then Ruth Tallwoman entered the schoolhouse, moving with surprising speed for her age.
"Bring them," she said simply. "All of them, now."
Something in her tone brooked no argument. Ellie quickly organized the children, leading them out the back as Ruth directed. Ben appeared from nowhere to help, lifting the smaller ones.
"Where are we going?"
Ellie asked.
"Away from what comes next,"
Ruth replied cryptically. They followed her beyond the town limits to a cluster of cottonwoods near a small spring. Other families had gathered, the ones threatened with foreclosure, those who'd spoken against Vane. A makeshift camp was forming, women organizing supplies while men stood guard. "You're withdrawing from town?" Ellie asked.
"Traditional response to tyrants."
Ruth said,
"When the powerful corrupt the village, the people make a new village."
She gestured to the growing camp. "Let Vane rule empty buildings."
"But the auction, we'll proceed with no one to bid against him. Empty victory."
Ruth's eyes glinted.
"Meanwhile, we plan, Desert has its own laws, older than papers and banks."
Throughout the day, more families arrived. News spread in whispers. Pike's violence had backfired, driving fence-sitters into opposition. By evening, nearly a third of San Judas had relocated to what people were calling Camp Justice. Ben worked tirelessly, helping construct shelters and organize defenses. His father's ranch hands brought supplies. Abraham himself directing operations with military efficiency. The split between father and son had healed in the crucible of crisis. As darkness fell, Ellie found herself teaching by firelight, children and adults alike gathering to learn. The topics had shifted. Now she taught water rights, property law, constitutional protections, knowledge as weapon, education as resistance. "The 14th Amendment," she explained, "guarantees due process. What Pike and Vane are doing violates federal law, not just territorial."
"Fat lot of good that does us,"
someone muttered. "By itself, nothing," Ellie agreed. "But if we document every violation, build an airtight case, eventually—" Gunfire cracked across the desert. Everyone froze, then scrambled for cover as more shots followed. But the shooting was distant. Wrong direction for an attack on the camp. "That's from town," Ada said, studying the muzzle flashes through field glasses. "Something's happening at the bank." They watched fires bloom in the darkness, not the bank, but the sheriff's office and Vane's warehouse. Chaos had erupted in San Judas, though whether spontaneous or orchestrated, none could say.
"Stay here,"
Ben told Ellie, already moving. "I need to see—"
"We need to see,"
she corrected, falling into step beside him.
"Ada, organize defenses here. If this is a distraction—"
"Already on it," the deputy assured her. They crept toward town, using arroyos and shadows for cover. The scene that greeted them defied expectation. Pike's men fought running battles with masked riders who struck and vanished like ghosts. The warehouse burned merrily, ammunition inside cooking off in spectacular displays.
"Who are they?"
Ben whispered. Ellie studied the raiders' tactics, their coordination.
"Not random. This is planned." professional? She caught sight of one rider's horse, a distinctive paint she'd seen before. That's Miguel Santos. He rides for the Herrera ranch south of here. The Herreras hate Vane. He's been encroaching on their grants for years. Enemy of my enemy, Ellie murmured. Look, they're drawing Pike's men away from the center of town. Indeed, the running fight was moving toward the desert, leaving the bank and courthouse oddly undefended. Opportunity knocked with a battering ram. We need those records, Ellie said. The ones we couldn't photograph. Too dangerous. If we're caught now. If we don't act now. When? She met his eyes. This chaos won't last. Once Pike regroups. Ben cursed softly but nodded. They slipped through empty streets, broken glass crunching underfoot. The bank stood dark, its doors locked but unguarded. Ellie produced her picks again. Becoming a habit, Ben observed as she worked. Blame your corrupting influence, she replied, smile flashing as tumblers clicked. Inside, quick! They moved by touch and instinct, grabbing ledgers and files. No time for discrimination, anything might prove valuable. Ben stuffed documents into a grain sack while Ellie searched Vane's office for specific prizes. Got them, she breathed, finding the foreclosure orders. These aren't properly sealed. Without correct documentation, they're invalid, hope-colored Ben's voice. Questionable at minimum. A good lawyer could... She broke off as footsteps approached. They froze, hardly breathing. The door opened. Thomas Paine peered in, looking as surprised as they were. Miss Roosevelt, Mr. Calder, I thought that is. I came to... Destroy evidence, Ellie guessed. He nodded miserably. Vane ordered me to burn certain files. Said if I didn't, my sister's children. He slumped against the doorframe. I can't win. Help them. Hurt others. Stand up to him. Innocents suffer. There's another way, Ellie said gently. Help us now. Testify to what you know. We'll protect your family. How you can't even protect yourselves. Watch us, Ben growled. Thomas, you're not alone anymore. The whole town's rising up. Well, most of it. The clerk wavered, then straightened. What do you need? Everything, Ellie said. Every corrupt deal, every forged document, but especially the originals of the Spanish land grants. Vane's been altering copies, but if the originals still exist... Vault basement, Thomas said immediately. He thinks I don't know, but I've seen him go down there. I can... A tremendous crash interrupted. Through the window, they saw the warehouse roof collapse in a shower of sparks. The fire was spreading, wind driving embers toward other buildings. The whole town could burn, Ben said, horrified. Unless we stop it. Ellie made rapid calculations. Thomas, get those grants. Every original document you can find. Ben, we need to organize a bucket brigade before... With whose authority? Pike's voice cut through the night. The sheriff stood in the doorway, gun drawn but wavering. Blood ran from a gash on his forehead, and his badge was missing. Caught you red-handed. Breaking and entering. Theft. Probably arson, too. We didn't start the fire, Ellie said calmly. But we'll stop it if you let us. Let you? Pike laughed wildly. I should shoot you where you stand. Vane would make me rich. Vane's done with you. Ben observed. Look at yourself. Amos, bleeding, badgeless. Your men scattered. When this is over, think he'll protect you. You're a liability now. The sheriff's gun hand trembled. For a moment, Ellie thought he might break, might see reason. Then his face hardened. Maybe so, but I'll take you with me. Ruth, tall woman, materialized from the shadows, her walking stick cracking across Pike's wrist. The gun flew free as the sheriff howled. Ada Sherman followed, badge glinting in the firelight. Amos Pike, you're under arrest, Ada announced, for corruption, abuse of power, and being a general disappointment to law enforcement everywhere. You can't arrest me, I'm the sheriff, We're the sheriff, Ada corrected. Emergency powers doctrine. When the primary law enforcement officer is incapacitated or corrupt, deputy assumes authority. She produced handcuffs. I've been waiting years to do this. As she secured Pike, more people emerged from the night, the townsfolk who'd remained, the ones too stubborn or too poor to flee, drawn by the fire and commotion. Seeing Pike arrested, they found courage. "The fire!" someone shouted. "It's spreading to the feed store." Chaos transformed into purpose. Ellie organized teams while Ben led the strongest men to create fire breaks. Thomas disappeared into the bank vault, returning with armloads of precious documents. Even some of Pike's former deputies joined the effort, choosing community over corruption. They fought the flames for hours, bucket brigades snaking from wells to burning buildings. Ellie worked alongside everyone else, her fine teacher's clothes ruined beyond repair. During a brief respite, she found Ben equally begrimed. "Some courtship," he said wryly. "Most couples have dances and picnics. We have arson and insurrection." "Disappointed?" she asked, wiping soot from his cheek. "Never." He caught her hand. "Ellie, when this is over, all of it, what then?" "Then we rebuild, better than before." "I mean us. What happens to us?" She studied his face, seeing past the dirt to the man who'd chosen her over everything safe and known. "Then we decide who we want to be, together." "I already know who I want to be," he said simply. "Yours." Before she could respond, shouts arose. The fire was contained. But new danger approached riders bearing torches, Vane at their head with hired guns. "Enough," the railroad man roared. "You want to play with fire, I'll burn this whole town to ash before I let rabble defeat me." He looked magnificent in his rage. Ellie thought clinically, also completely unhinged. Desperation did that to men who'd never faced real opposition. "You destroy everything," she called out. "Even your precious railroad depot? I'll rebuild on your ashes, starting with you, Miss Hart." He raised a pistol, and time slowed. Ellie saw Ben moving to shield her, saw Ada raising her rifle, saw death approaching on brass wings. Then the night erupted in thunder. Not gunfire hoofbeats. Cavalry horses burst from the darkness, uniformed soldiers surrounding Vane's party with practiced ease. A lieutenant dismounted, saluting Abraham Calder, who rode with them. "Mr. Vane, I'm Lieutenant Samuel Grant, Fort Huachuca. We've received disturbing reports of civil unrest and possible insurrection." "Thank God," Vane straightened. "Arrest these criminals immediately. They've destroyed property, assaulted officers." "Interesting." Grant produced a sheaf of papers. "Because our information suggests you're the criminal here. Financial fraud, intimidation, conspiracy to deprive citizens of property rights." He smiled thinly. "Mr. Calder was quite thorough in his report, and these documents his son sent ahead fascinating reading." Ellie's heart leaped. Some of their riders had gotten through after all. "This is ridiculous," Vane sputtered. "I demand—" "You're in no position to demand anything," Grant interrupted. "Silas Vane, by order of the territorial governor, you're under arrest pending federal investigation." The businessman's composure finally shattered. He wheeled his horse, trying to flee, but soldiers blocked every route. In desperation, he fired at Grant and missed. Return fire didn't. Vane toppled from his saddle, clutching his shoulder. Not dead, but decisively ended. His hired guns threw down their weapons, suddenly eager to distance themselves from their employer's crimes. As soldiers secured the scene and medics tended wounds, Ellie felt the tension drain from her body. They'd won somehow. Impossibly. They'd won. "It's over," Ben said wonderingly. "No," she corrected, watching townspeople emerge from hiding, seeing hope replace fear on weathered faces. "Now it begins, the real work of building something better." Dawn broke over San Judas.
painting the desert in gentle pastels. Smoke still rose from smoldering ruins, but already people planned reconstruction. The bank would need new management. Thomas Paine, perhaps, with his insider knowledge and newfound backbone. Law enforcement would rebuild under Ada Sherman's honest leadership. In the school, Ellie smiled, imagining expanded classes, adult education programs, a library worthy of the name. So much to do, so much to teach. Regrets? Ben asked, finding her on the schoolhouse steps. None, she said firmly. Elizabeth Hart is dead and buried. Eleanor Roosevelt has work to do. And Ben Calder has a ranch to run, contracts to read, maybe a school board position to fill. His grin was answer enough. Together they watched their town wake to its first free morning, ready to write a new chapter in the story of San Judas. The desert wind whispered promises of rain, of growth, of futures unlimited by the greed of small men. And in the schoolhouse, books waited patiently for eager hands to open them and discover the power that knowledge brings. Justice had come to San Judas at last, born on the wings of education and the courage of ordinary people who'd decided that enough was enough. It wasn't a perfect victory, those only existed in fairy tales, but it was real, and it was theirs. And tomorrow, Ellie thought with satisfaction, they'd make it even better. The makeshift courthouse buzzed with nervous energy as townspeople filled every available seat. 3 weeks had passed since Vane's arrest. And today, San Judas would hold its own hearing, not a trial, but a public reckoning. Judge William Blackstone, sent from Prescott at the territorial governor's request, presided with stern fairness. Eleanor Roosevelt sat in the front row, documents organized before her, as the town's unofficial legal advocate. She'd spent sleepless nights preparing evidence, teaching citizens their rights, transforming raw outrage into structured arguments. Ben Calder sat beside her, his presence steady as granite. His reading had improved remarkably. He devoured legal texts with the same determination he once reserved for ranching. Between them lay the McGuffey reader that had started it all, a talisman of how far they'd come. This hearing will address property disputes arising from fraudulent practices, Judge Blackstone announced. We'll examine evidence, hear testimony, and establish rightful ownership. Mr. Vane, though recovering from his injury, has provided sworn depositions through his attorney. The attorney, a slick man from Phoenix named Cornelius Vanderbilt, stood. Your Honor, my client maintains all transactions were legal, all contracts binding. Then let's examine them, Ellie interrupted, rising, starting with the Reyes family loan. For the next hour, she methodically destroyed Vane's paper empire. Each document revealed new deceptions, interest rates changed after signing, dates altered, entire clauses added to carbon copies. Thomas Paine testified about the dual bookkeeping, his voice growing stronger with each revelation. I watched Mr. Vane forge signatures. Thomas said, taught me how to do it too, said it was standard business practice. I have samples of his work, if the court would like to compare. Vanderbilt objected frantically, but the evidence was overwhelming. When Maria Reyes took the stand, her quiet dignity as she described nearly losing her cafe brought tears to many eyes. We paid every month, she said, scraped and saved, gave up necessities. Then suddenly we owe double, triple. How is that justice? It isn't, Judge Blackstone said grimly. Next case. Family after family told similar stories. Jorge's tale of midnight surveyors moving boundary markers drew particular condemnation. Ruth Tallwoman presented ancient maps and oral histories, establishing prior claims that predated even the Spanish grants. This land remembers, she said simply. Before papers, before fences, there were agreements, water shared, grazing rotated. The railroad would destroy that balance. Objection, Vanderbilt cried. Native testimony has no bearing on legal property rights. Overruled, Blackstone snapped. In this territory, All historical claims matter. Continue, Mrs. Tall Woman. Ben testified about his family's ranch, reading clearly from documents he couldn't have deciphered weeks ago. According to these original grants, our water rights extend to the seasonal floodplain. Vane surveys deliberately ignored this, placing the railroad route through our most productive grazing. And you can read these documents yourself now, the judge asked, seeming surprised by Ben's literacy given his rough appearance. Yes, sir, Miss Roosevelt taught me. Pride colored his voice. Every rancher should read his own papers. Trusting others with that power is what got us into this mess. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several other ranchers nodded, some looking sheepish about their own literacy struggles. The afternoon brought explosive testimony from Ada Sherman. As acting sheriff, she'd discovered more than financial crimes in Pike's records. Bribes, intimidation, false arrests. She listed. Pike jailed men who wouldn't sell, then released them when they signed over deeds. 3 suspicious deaths over 2 years, all opponents of the railroad. Speculation. Vanderbilt protested. Investigation. Ada corrected. I have witness statements, including one from Jesse Pike himself. Seems the former sheriff's son developed a conscience in jail. Jesse, brought from custody, looked haggard but determined. Pa made me help. Said it was for the town's good, bringing progress. But I saw what we did to people. The Hendricks family, run off their land at gunpoint. Old Sam Carter, beaten till he signed. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. His testimony broke what remained of Vane's defenses. Even Vanderbilt looked uncomfortable defending such actions. As afternoon stretched toward evening, Judge Blackstone called a recess. Ellie stepped outside for air, finding Ben waiting. You were magnificent, he said softly. Like watching a general win a war with words instead of bullets. The war's not over, she warned. Vane still has influence, money for appeals. Let tomorrow worry about tomorrow. Today, you gave these people hope. He took her hand, careless of watching eyes. You gave me more than that. Ben. Ellie, I need to say this. However the judge rules, whatever comes next, I want you to know. Commotion erupted from the street. Riders approached fast, dust clouds billowing. Ellie tensed, fearing Vane had hired more guns. But Ben relaxed. That's our brand, he said. Ranch hands, riding hard. Something's wrong. The lead rider, young Samuel Colt from the Calder spread, nearly fell from his lathered horse. Fire, the ranch is burning. Ice flooded Ellie's veins. Your father... Safe, but trapped in the main house. Some of Vane's men, the ones who escaped arrest, they came for revenge. Ben was already moving. How many? 6, maybe 8, armed and dug in. They say they'll burn everything unless the judge frees Vane and drops all charges. Judge Blackstone emerged, having heard the commotion. Hostage-taking and arson, they've just made things infinitely worse for their employer. Won't matter if people die, Ada said, checking her weapons. I'll gather deputies. No time, Ben interrupted. Every minute counts. He looked at Ellie. I have to go. We have to go, she corrected. Ada, maintain order here. Judge, I request a postponement. Granted, Miss Roosevelt. Be careful. She was already moving, grateful for the split riding skirt she'd taken to wearing. Ben helped her mount a spare horse, his face tight with worry. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She checked the derringer in her boot, another old habit from Pinkerton days. Partners. Remember? They rode hard through gathering dusk. A dozen men with them. The glow on the horizon grew brighter. Orange death eating the sky. By the time they reached Calderland, the barn was fully ablaze, flames licking toward the main house where gunfire crackled. There, in the rocks above, Samuel reported, Got the house pinned down. Mister, Calder and 5 hands are fortified inside, but the fire's spreading.
Ben studied the terrain with a tactician's eye. They expect a frontal assault. Ellie, take Samuel and 3 men around the back. If you can reach the well house, I can lay down suppressing fire, she finished. Draw their attention while you flank left. Classic Pinkerton tactic. I thought you left that life behind. Some skills stay useful. Go. They split up. Ellie leading her group through familiar terrain. She'd visited the ranch enough to know its secrets. The well house offered perfect cover and sight lines to the attacker's position. On my signal, she told her men, checking loads. Aim high, we want them pinned. Not necessarily dead. Dead men can't testify. Yes, ma'am, Samuel said, clearly struggling with taking orders from a woman, but trusting Ben's faith in her. Gunfire erupted from Ben's position. The attackers swiveled to meet this threat, exposing their backs to Ellie's group. Now! Her shot took the leader's hat off, sending him diving for cover. Her companions followed suit, laying down disciplined fire that sent the outlaws scrambling. Caught between 2 forces, their position became untenable. Throw down your guns, Ben commanded. You're surrounded. Most complied, but 2 tried to run. One headed straight for the burning barn and the main house beyond. If he reached it, Abraham Calder and the others were done for. Ellie didn't think, just acted. Her horse responded perfectly, cutting off the man's escape route. He spun, raising his gun, and she shot it from his hand. The Derringer's second barrel pointed at his chest. Don't, she advised coldly. I've had a very trying day. He dropped, clutching his bleeding hand. Around them. The brief battle ended as quickly as it began. Ben's men secured the prisoners while bucket brigades formed to save what they could. Abraham Calder emerged from the house, singed but defiant. His eyes found Ben, then Ellie, and something shifted in his weathered face. You came, he said simply. You're my father, Ben replied, whatever our differences. No, I meant her. Abraham stepped forward, extending a soot-stained hand to Ellie. You could have stayed safe in town. Instead, you risked everything for a man who insulted you. That's character, miss. It's what partners do, Ellie said, accepting the handshake. Oh, partners. The old man tested the word. Yes, I suppose you are. He looked at his son. Benjamin, when this mess is sorted, we need to talk about the future, the ranch's future. His gaze included Ellie, all of our futures. They fought the fire until midnight, saving the house and most of the outbuildings. The barn was lost, but livestock survived. As exhausted crews sprawled on the grass, Ellie found herself tending wounds, another Pinkerton skill proving useful. Hold still, she told one of the captured outlaws, cleaning his burned arm. This will hurt. Why you helping me? He growled. I came to burn you out. Because that's what decent people do, she said. Maybe you forgot. Working for Vane, but it's not too late to remember. Ben appeared with water and blankets. Together they worked through the injured, side by side. No words needed. This was partnership too, the unglamorous aftermath, the quiet care. The judge will want these men's testimony. Ada Sherman said, having arrived with reinforcements, Vane ordering arson and attempted murder, that's federal prison territory. Good, Abraham said flatly. Man tried to destroy everything I built, everything my father built. He looked at Ben. Everything you'll build, son, you and your partner. Dawn found them back in town, prisoners secured and wounded tended. Judge Blackstone reconvened court despite the early hour, citing urgency of circumstances. In light of last night's events, he began, and the overwhelming evidence presented, I'm prepared to issue immediate rulings. The courtroom fell silent. First, all foreclosures initiated by Vane's bank are hereby nullified. Original deeds will be honored, with boundaries surveyed according to historical markers and natural features, not manipulated maps. Cheers erupted, quickly hushed. Second, The proposed railroad route through Boxwood Wash is rejected. Any future development must respect existing property rights and water access. More cheers, louder now. Third, assets of the corrupt bank will be seized and redistributed to those wrongfully charged. A new bank will be chartered under territorial supervision. Your Honor. Thomas Paine stood nervously. I'd like to volunteer for that position. I know the books, the people. I want to make things right. Noted, Mr. Paine. Finally. Blackstone's gaze found Ellie. This court recognizes the extraordinary service of Miss Eleanor Roosevelt in exposing corruption and defending justice. Whatever her past, her present actions speak louder than any history. Ellie felt tears threaten, quickly blinked away. Acceptance, official and public more than she dared hope. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm recommending territorial funding for expanding the school. Education, as Miss Roosevelt proved, is the best defense against future exploitation. This time nothing could contain the celebration. People hugged, wept, thanked God and each other. In the chaos, Ben pulled Ellie outside. We did it, he said wonderingly. We actually did it. The town did it, she corrected. We just helped them find their voice. Ellie. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away dust and tears. I love you, not for what you were or what you might become, but for who you are, right now, this moment. Ben. Marry me. The words tumbled out, urgent and honest. I know it's too soon, too complicated, too everything, but I also know I want to face whatever comes next with you, as husband and wife, partners in everything. She couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. This man who'd learned to read for her, who'd chosen her over family, who'd fought beside her without question, how could she refuse? The schoolteacher and the rancher, she managed finally. What will people say? That he kissed her in secret once. Ben grinned. And she couldn't escape him. Didn't want to. Still don't, she admitted, pulling him down for a kiss that had nothing secret about it. Let the whole town see she was done hiding. They parted to find an audience, Maria beaming, Ada nodding approval, even Abraham looking satisfied. About time. The old rancher grunted, Now, about that wedding. The ranch house needs to be rebuilt anyway. Might as well add a schoolroom wing while we're at it. Father, don't argue with your elders. Boy, Miss Roosevelt Ellie, you'll need space for all those books and students. Consider it a wedding gift. He winked. Besides, someone needs to teach my future grandchildren their letters. Ellie blushed while Ben laughed, the sound rich and free. Around them, San Judas began its transformation from a town ruled by fear to one built on justice. There would be challenges, there always were, but they'd face them together, with education as their weapon and partnership as their shield. The morning sun painted the desert gold, and in the schoolhouse, books waited for eager hands. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time in years, Eleanor Roosevelt teacher, fighter, soon-to-be bride looked forward to tomorrow. The acrid smell of smoke still hung over Calder Ranch as the sun set. Eleanor Roosevelt stood amid the ruins of the barn, cataloging what could be salvaged. Around her, townspeople worked alongside ranch hands, united by crisis. The trial's victory felt hollow against this destruction. Miss Roosevelt. Samuel Colt approached, hat in hand. Found something you should see. He led her to the burned barn's foundation where workers had cleared debris. There, scratched into a support beam that had somehow survived, were words, This is just the beginning, V. Fane, Ellie breathed. Even imprisoned awaiting federal trial, his reach extended. There's more, Samuel said grimly. He produced a partially burned ledger. Found this in what's left of the tack room. It's got names, dates, people still loyal to Vane. Ellie studied the pages, Her blood chilled as she recognized names prominent citizens, territorial officials, even a federal judge. Vane's web stretched far beyond San Judas. Miss Ellie, young Clara Barton, came running, braids flying. "Sheriff Ada needs you quick." At the main house, she found chaos. Ada Sherman stood over Jesse Pike, who writhed on the ground, clutching his throat. His face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "Poison," Ada said tersely. "In his food at the jail, someone wanted him quiet before he could testify more." Ruth Tallwoman knelt beside Jesse, forcing something down his throat. "Charcoal mixture. It might help." She looked up at Ellie. This was meant to kill quickly. Professional work. "Vane's cleaning house," Ellie said. "Anyone who could testify against him." Her eyes widened. "Thomas and the other witnesses." They raced back to town, Ben joining them with armed riders. The bank sat dark, but Thomas Payne answered their pounding, alive but frightened. "Someone tried to break in an hour ago," he stammered. "I barricaded myself in the vault. Pack everything important." Ben ordered. "You're staying at the ranch tonight. All witnesses are." As they organized protection for those who'd testified, a commotion arose from the jail. Through the barred windows, they could see Vane's attorney, Cornelius Vanderbilt, arguing with the federal marshals who'd arrived that morning. "My client has rights," Vanderbilt shouted. "This provincial lockup is inadequate. Your client is a federal prisoner." Marshal Wyatt Earp replied calmly. "He stays put until transport arrives." "Then I demand—" The attorney's words cut off as a rifle shot echoed across town. Vanderbilt crumpled, clutching his shoulder. More shots followed, muzzle flashes sparking from rooftops and alleys. "Ambush!" Ada yelled. "Everyone down!" Ellie pulled Clara Barton behind a water trough as bullets sparked off the jail's stone walls. This wasn't random violence. It was a coordinated assault to free Vane. "The school," Maria Reyes pointed. "The children doing evening lessons." Horror gripped Ellie. A dozen students were trapped in the crossfire. Without thinking, she broke from cover, sprinting toward the schoolhouse. Bullets whined past as she crashed through the door. "Everyone on the floor," she commanded. "Under the desks. Now." The children obeyed, terror in their eyes. Through the windows, she saw the battle intensifying. Attackers pressed toward the jail while defenders scrambled for position. "Miss Roosevelt," William Cody whispered, "are we going to die?" "No," she said firmly. "We're going to be smart. Remember our geography lessons. What's behind the school?" "The old mine shaft," Tommy Edison said, "but it's boarded up." "Then we'll unboard it, quietly, carefully. Follow me." She led them to the back room where old supplies were stored. The boards over the mine entrance were weathered, weak, working together. They pried enough loose for the children to squeeze through. "It connects to the wash." She told them, "Follow it north to the Hendricks farm. Tell them what's happening." "What about you?" Clara asked. "I'll be right behind you. Go." As the last child disappeared into the shaft, footsteps thundered on the porch. Ellie grabbed a rifle from the wall. She'd insisted on keeping weapons after the first threats and positioned herself. The door burst open. 2 gunmen entered, clearly expecting easy prey. Ellie's first shot took one in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second dove aside, firing wildly. "It's that teacher," he yelled. "The Pinkerton." More men crowded the entrance. Ellie retreated, using desks for cover, making every shot count. Her ammunition ran low as they pressed forward. Then Ben's voice roared from outside. "Ellie!" The attackers turned to face this new threat. Ben and Abraham Calder led a charge of ranch hands and townsmen, catching the gunmen in a deadly crossfire. The battle in the schoolhouse lasted seconds. "The children?" Ben asked, helping her up. "Safe," sent them through the mine. She accepted more ammunition gratefully. "The jail?" "Holding. Wyatt Earp knows his business."
Abraham looked at her with newfound respect. As do you, it seems. They rejoined the larger battle, now centered on the jail. The attackers had fortified themselves in the hotel across the street, pouring fire at anyone who approached. Marshal Earp and his men were pinned down. "We need to flank them," Ellie said, her tactical mind racing. "Ben, if your men could—" "Already thinking it," he said. "Pa, take the left with Samuel and the boys. We'll go right." "And I'll go up," Ellie said, eyeing the church bell tower that overlooked the hotel. "Ellie, no. Best vantage point in town. Trust me." Before he could argue further, she was moving. The church stood empty, Father Francis having wisely evacuated. She climbed the narrow stairs to the bell tower, rifle in hand. The view revealed everything. She counted 12 attackers in the hotel, plus others scattered through town. But she also saw something they didn't. Ada Sherman leading deputies through the hotel's back entrance. Ellie opened fire, targeting the attacker's leader. Her shot shattered the window beside him, drawing attention upward. Return fire sparked off the church bells, setting them ringing. That bronze cacophony seemed to galvanize the town. Citizens who'd hidden emerged with weapons, shotguns, pickaxes, even kitchen knives. The attackers found themselves vastly outnumbered. "Surrender!" Marshal Earp's voice boomed. "You're surrounded and outgunned." Most threw down their weapons, but a core group tried to break out, heading for the jail with desperate purpose. Ellie tracked their leader through her sights, a face she recognized from wanted posters. Jack Slade, enforcer for hire. Vane's nuclear option. Her shot took his hat off. The second took his gun from his hand. He spun, looking up at the bell tower, and she saw him calculate distances, angles. Then Ada Sherman's rifle butt ended his mathematics. The battle ended as suddenly as it began. Smoke drifted through streets littered with wounded and surrendered gunmen. From her perch, Ellie counted casualties, miraculously few dead, though many injured. She descended to find Ben waiting, relief plain on his dust-streaked face. "You magnificent, infuriating woman," he said, pulling her close. "A bell tower, really." "Best tactical position," she murmured against his chest. "Old habits." Thank God for them. They emerged to find the town transformed. The attack had failed spectacularly, leaving Vane's network exposed and broken. Marshal Earp supervised arrests while Dr. Marcus Garvey, summoned from his retirement, tended wounds. 23 captured, Ada reported, including some very interesting names. Vane's reach went deeper than we thought. But not deep enough. Judge Blackstone said he'd emerged from the courthouse where he'd barricaded himself with court staff. This attack on federal officers changes everything. Vane won't see trial. He'll plea bargain to avoid the gallows. After all this, Maria protested, he gets to bargain. To expose the rest of his network. Yes, Ellie said quietly. Sometimes that's how justice works. Imperfectly, but thoroughly. As dawn approached, they gathered at the jail where Vane sat in chains, his empire in ruins. The railroad man looked smaller somehow, his expensive clothes torn and dirty. "You've destroyed everything," he told Ellie through the bars. "Progress, development, the future." "Your version of the future," she corrected. "Built on theft and lies, we'll build better. With what you think the railroad will come now, investors, you've doomed this town to poverty." "Maybe," Ben said, stepping forward. "Or maybe we'll find our own way. Cattle drives to new markets, mining claims worked honestly. A town that grows because people want to live here, not because they're forced to sell." Abraham Calder joined his son. "Already got telegrams from honest merchants. Hearing we cleaned house. Seems corruption was bad for their business too." Vane's face twisted. "You fools. You have no idea what you've done. The people I work for." "We'll find other towns to exploit," Marshal Earp interrupted. "But not this one. Not anymore." They left Vane to his bitter defeat. Outside, the town stirred to life. Citizens emerging to repair damage and reclaim their streets. The schoolhouse windows were shattered again, but the building stood. "We'll need new glass," Ellie sighed. "Among other things," Ben agreed. He produced something from his pocket, the McGuffey reader. Singed, but intact. "Found this in the ruins. Thought you'd want it." She took the book, fingers tracing its familiar cover. "Our beginning." "No," he corrected, tilting her face up. "Just our first chapter. We've got a whole story yet to write." Around them, San Judas began the slow work of healing. Jesse Pike, recovered enough to speak, provided more testimony about his father's crimes. Thomas Payne organized citizens to audit the bank properly. Ruth, tall woman, tended both defenders and attackers with equal skill. "There'll be more fighting," Ada warned, watching federal marshals load prisoners for transport. "Vane's bosses won't give up easily." "Then we'll be ready," Ellie said. "The whole town, educated and armed with truth." Speaking of education, Judge Blackstone approached. "Miss Roosevelt, I've been authorized to offer you an official position, Territorial Superintendent of Schools. You'd oversee education across Arizona, ensuring other towns don't fall prey to ignorance." The offer stunned her. Ben's hand tightened on her support, but also question. Would she leave? "I'm honored," Ellie said carefully. "But my place is here. These children, this town, we're not finished yet. Perhaps someday, but not now." Blackstone smiled. "I hoped you'd say that. The position will wait. Arizona needs teachers like you, but San Judas needs you more." As the judge departed, Ben exhaled slowly. "You'd have been brilliant at it." "I'm brilliant here," she said, "with you, with our school, with the life we're building." "Our life," he repeated. "I like the sound of that. When this settles—" "Benjamin Franklin Calder," she interrupted. "If you're about to suggest we wait for some perfect moment to marry, think again. We've been shot at, burned out, and nearly blown up. Perfect doesn't exist." "Next week, then. Tomorrow." He laughed, rich and full. "Tomorrow it is, though people might talk about the haste." "Let them. We've earned our happiness." The sun climbed higher, revealing the full scope of damage and recovery. Already, the saloon owner was boarding windows while his wife swept glass. The general store reopened, offering credit to those who'd defended the town. Children emerged from the Hendricks farm, safe and chattering about their mine adventure. "Miss Roosevelt," Clara Barton ran up, grabbing her hand. "We were so brave, just like you taught us." "Braver," Ellie said, kneeling to meet the girl's eyes. "You protected each other. That's the best kind of courage." "Will we have school tomorrow?" Ellie looked at the damaged building, then at the eager faces gathering around. "Yes, maybe not inside, but yes, learning doesn't stop for broken windows." "Or bullets," Tommy Edison added proudly. "We're tough students." "The toughest," she agreed, as the children scattered to share their adventures. Ben drew her aside. "You know this isn't over. Vane's confession will bring more investigations, more danger." "I know, but we'll face it together. The whole town will." She looked at the citizens working side by side, Mexican and Anglo, rich and poor, united by shared struggle. "That's what education does. It doesn't just teach facts, it builds community." "And you built ours," he said. "My brilliant, brave, beautiful teacher." "Flattery will get you everywhere. Mr. Calder." "Good, because I plan to spend the next 50 years telling you how extraordinary you are." They stood together, watching their town rebuild once more. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, trials, investigations, the slow work of justice, but it would also bring their wedding, however simple. And the next day would bring school, children learning to read and question and stand up for truth. The bell tower stood empty now, its bronze voices silent. But Ellie knew they would ring again, not for warning, but for celebration, for weddings and victories, for the everyday triumphs of a town that had found its courage. San Judas had been tested by fire, literally and figuratively. It had not broken. Instead, like steel in a forge, it had emerged stronger, tempered by truth and bound by justice. And at its heart stood a one-room schoolhouse where children learned that knowledge was power. Courage was contagious, and sometimes the best love stories began with secret kisses and forbidden lessons. The ranch heir had kissed the schoolteacher in secret. She had blushed, yet couldn't escape him. But now, neither wanted to escape. They had found something worth fighting for, worth building together. Tomorrow would tell the rest of their story. The morning sun painted Calder Ranch in soft gold as Eleanor Roosevelt adjusted her simple white dress. 3 months had passed since the battle for San Judas, and today, amid the newly rebuilt barn and flourishing gardens, she would marry Benjamin Franklin Calder. "You look beautiful," Maria Reyes said, pinning desert wildflowers in Ellie's hair. "Though I still think you should have waited for a proper wedding dress from Phoenix." "This is proper enough." Ellie replied, "It's clean, it's mine, and I can teach school in it tomorrow." Ever practical. Ruth Tallwoman observed from her seat by the window. "Good. Fairy tales are for children. Real love works in everyday clothes." Through the window, Ellie could see the transformed ranch. The new barn stood proud, built with community hands. Near it, construction had begun on what Abraham Calder insisted on calling the Roosevelt Calder Educational Wing, a series of rooms for the expanded school they envisioned. "The children are ready," Ada Sherman announced, entering in her best deputy's uniform. Lined up with their flowers, excited as puppies, Tommy Edison's been practicing his reading for the ceremony. "He's reading," Ellie's heart swelled. The boy who'd once nearly died chasing marbles had become one of her most dedicated students. "Clear as a bell. Says he wants to be like Mr. Been able to sign his own name with pride." A knock interrupted them. "Ladies?" Abraham Calder's voice carried through the door. "If the bride's willing, I'd be honored to escort her." The request surprised Ellie. Despite their reconciliation, she hadn't expected this gesture from Ben's father. "I'd be honored to accept," she called back. Abraham entered, looking uncomfortable in his formal suit but determined. "My son's a fortunate man," he said simply. "I was wrong about you, Miss Roosevelt. Wrong about a lot of things. Let me make this small amend." She took his offered arm. "We all make mistakes, Mr. Calder. What matters is learning from them. Ben taught me that. You taught him." He patted her hand. "Welcome to the family. Daughter." They walked through the ranch house, past rooms filled with memories of conflict now overlaid with hope. Outside, the entire town had gathered. Rough benches made from barn planks seated merchants beside ranchers, former enemies united in celebration. At the makeshift altar built around the old cottonwood that had survived drought and flood, Ben waited. He wore his father's wedding suit, altered to fit his broader shoulders. His face, when he saw her, showed everything she needed to know about their future. Father Francis, recovered from the town's ordeals, beamed as they approached. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we gather in the sight of God and this community to witness something rare, a love forged in hardship, tested by fire, and proven true." As Tommy Edison stepped forward with the rings, reading his part carefully from a worn card, Ellie caught sight of the guests. Jorge and his family, their farm saved. Maria, her cafe thriving. Deputy Ada, badge polished, watching for trouble even now. Ruth Tallwoman, nodding approval. Even young Clara Barton, flowers braided in her hair, sitting with the other students. "Eleanor," Ben said when prompted, his voice strong and sure. "You taught me to read, but more than that, you taught me to see injustice and fight it, to see hope where others saw none, to see a future worth building together.
I promise to spend my life learning from you, protecting what we create, and loving you with everything I am." Tears blurred her vision as she responded, "Benjamin, you showed me that running from the past meant missing the future. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it. That love doesn't weaken us. It makes us stronger than we ever imagined. I promise to stand beside you, to teach our children, all our children, to read not just words, but the world, to build a life worthy of the chances we've taken." "The rings," Father Francis prompted. Tommy approached, bursting with pride. "I can read this part too." He held up the card. "These rings show. He sounded out carefully. "Unbroken love and faithfulness." "Perfect," Ben said, ruffling the boy's hair before taking Ellie's ring. They exchanged the simple band's gold from the local mine, crafted by the blacksmith who'd once shod horses for Vane's men. As Ben slipped the ring on her finger, Ellie remembered that first night, him struggling to write his name, her hand guiding his. "By the power vested in me," Father Francis concluded, grinning, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ben, you may kiss your bride, and this time, nobody has to hide it." Laughter rippled through the crowd as Ben drew her close. "No more secrets," he murmured before kissing her thoroughly to enthusiastic applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," Father Francis announced, "I present Mr. and Mrs. Benjamin and Eleanor Calder." The celebration that followed was distinctly San Judas, part frontier feast, part victory party. Tables groaned under the weight of Maria's cooking. Musicians played while children danced. Stories were shared of the battles fought and won. "Never thought I'd see this day," Judge Blackstone told Ellie during a quiet moment. He'd returned for the wedding, bringing news from the territorial capital. "Vane's testimony has led to 12 more arrests. The corruption ran deep, but you lit the fuse that blew it open." "We all did," Ellie corrected. "One person knowing the truth changes nothing. A whole town knowing it changes everything." Speaking of change. Thomas Paine approached nervously. As the new bank president, he'd transformed from timid clerk to respected businessman. "The territorial government approved our charter. San Judas Cooperative Bank officially opens next month. Community-owned. Transparent books. Education loans at fair rates." Education loans, Ellie's interest sharpened. "Your idea. Remember, help families send their children to higher schools. Maybe even college. Invest in mines, not just land." "Thomas, that's wonderful." He blushed. "It's the least I could do. After everything—" As evening approached, Ben found Ellie watching their students perform a play about the town's recent history. Young William Cody played a remarkably accurate Sheriff Pike, while Clara Barton portrayed Ellie with endearing seriousness. "Our children are dramatic," Ben observed, arm around her waist. "All children, but ours especially." She leaned into him. "Happy?" "Beyond words. Though I've got plenty of words now, thanks to you." "The ranch heir kissed the schoolteacher in secret," she quoted softly. "Remember that night? Every detail. You blushed, but couldn't escape." "Didn't want to escape," she corrected, as she had so many times, though I tried to convince myself otherwise. "And now? Now I'm exactly where I belong, where we belong." Abraham Calder raised his glass for a toast. "To the future," he began, voice carrying across the gathering. "To a town that fought for justice, to a school that teaches truth, and to my son and daughter-in-law, who showed us that sometimes the best partnerships start with the most unlikely meetings." "Here, here," the crowd echoed. As stars emerged over the desert, Ruth, tall woman, approached the newlyweds. "I have a gift," she said, producing a leather-wrapped bundle. Inside lay a hand-drawn map, beautifully detailed. "The old boundaries," she explained. "Before Spanish grants, before American claims, water sources, seasonal changes, sacred places, Teach the children this too. Help them understand the land's true history.
We will, Ellie promised.
In the new school, there'll be room for all knowledge.
Good. Memory is its own education. As the celebration wound down, Ben and Ellie stole away to the hill overlooking both ranch and town. Lights twinkled below honest lights in honest homes, no longer darkened by fear. "What do you see?" Ben asked.
Possibility,
Ellie answered. A town where children read contracts before their parents sign, where different people share knowledge instead of suspicion, where the railroad will come eventually but on our terms, not built on stolen land. And us, she smiled.
I see winter evenings teaching you to read poetry, summer mornings with our children running through these hills, years of building something that lasts.
She paused.
I see home.
Elizabeth Hart is really gone, he asked gently.
No regrets.
She served her purpose, led me here, to you, to this life. Ellie touched his face.
Eleanor Roosevelt Calder has work to do.
They stood together as the desert wind carried sounds of celebration, of life continuing despite everything survived. Below, the new barn rose solid against darkness. The schoolhouse waited for tomorrow's lessons. Their town settled into peaceful sleep. 6 months later, a letter arrived from Washington. The president himself commended San Judas for exposing corruption, suggesting it might serve as a model for other territories. Included was funding for a territorial teaching college, to be built in San Judas with Eleanor Roosevelt Calder as its founding director.
We did it,
Ben said, reading over her shoulder in their new study. Changed everything.
Started to,
Ellie corrected, hand resting on her still flat stomach where their first child grew. The real work's just beginning. Through the window, they could see students arriving for evening classes, adults learning alongside children, barriers breaking down one lesson at a time. Maria's daughter Marie worked with Jorge's son Miguel on mathematics. Former Vane supporters studied beside those they'd oppressed, united by the democracy of education.
No more secrets,
Ben murmured, echoing their wedding day.
Only dreams,
Ellie agreed, and plans to make them real. As sunset painted the desert in shades of hope, the bell tower rebuilt and reinforced rang out the hour. Clear notes carried across San Judas, calling students to learn, citizens to gather, lovers to remember. The ranch heir had kissed the schoolteacher in secret. She had blushed, yet couldn't escape him. But that was just the beginning of their story. The real tale was written in every child who learned to read, every adult who claimed their rights, every family that stayed to build instead of fleeing to survive. San Judas had become what Eleanor Roosevelt Calder always believed it could be, a place where education conquered fear, where community trumped corruption, where love was not weakness but the greatest strength of all. And in the one-room schoolhouse that started it all, books waited patiently for tomorrow's lessons, holding infinite possibilities between their covers. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed following Eleanor and Ben's journey through the trials and triumphs of San Judas. If you're listening to this tale right now, please leave a comment below and let me know where in the world you're enjoying this story. I'd love to connect with you and hear your thoughts about their adventure. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, Wild West Stories, 1850, for more tales from the American frontier. Give this video a like if it touched your heart, and please hit that hype button to help this story reach even more listeners who love tales of courage, justice, and romance in the Old West. Until our next adventure, partners, happy trails.